In a sermon by Daniel Bennett, he tells a story about going into a snack shop with his 5-year-old daughter. They were at a sporting goods store and on a daddy-daughter date. I'm not sure if that was her choice to go to a sporting goods store, but she wanted to go to the snack shop in the sporting goods store. And they walked in, and her eyes lit up at the rows and rows of colorful candy. As she picked up a package, she said, "Daddy, what's this?" And he said, "Oh, these are Skittles." She said, "Are they good?" He said, "Well, some people like them a lot." "How much does it cost?" she asked. And he told her the price. Well, she stared at it thoughtfully for a while, and then she carefully put it back and moved on to another shelf. And she picked up a different treat, and she said, What's this, Daddy?" And he said, "Oh, that's a Hershey's candy bar." And she said, "Is it good?" Well, it happened to be his favorite candy, and so he said, "Yes, it's God's gift to mankind." "How much does it cost?" she said. And on, down the row of candy they went, always with the same questions. Well, Daniel began to get a little exasperated at this as this went on, because all along the way he kept assuring her that he was going to buy her a treat. When he got home, he related the story to his wife, and she smiled and she said, I know why she was doing that," she said. "She has $2 to her name, and she's trying to figure out what is the best thing I can get for $2. We measure the value of things by what we will give up in order to obtain them. If she's going to give up her precious $2, what is the most she can get? There were many people following Jesus, accompanying Jesus in the crowds that followed him, but they were not really following him in the sense of learning from him. They simply wanted the fringe benefits from his ministry. So what does Jesus do? He presents a very high view of discipleship. He raises the requirement out of their reach, which prompts us to ask, why does Jesus make discipleship so costly? Here is the story from Luke 14, starting with verse 25. Now large crowds were accompanying Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, wanting to build a tower, doesn't sit down first and compute the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish the tower, all who see it will begin to make fun of him. They will say, 'Oh, this man began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king, going out to confront another king in battle, will not sit down first and determine whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he cannot succeed, he will send a representative while the other is still a long way off and ask for terms of peace. In the same way, therefore, not one of you can be my disciple if he does not renounce all his own possessions. Salt is good, but if salt loses its flavor, how can its flavor be restored? It is of no value for the soil or for the manure pile. It is to be thrown out. The one who has ears to hear had better listen." This morning, I want us to kind of drill down into this idea. Very simply, true discipleship always leads us to Christ. Why does Jesus make discipleship so costly? It's because he is everything, and he has everything, and he is worth everything. So naturally, the first step is to devote yourself to Christ. verse 25 and 26 again. Now large crowds were accompanying Jesus, and turning to them he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." Hate your family. Hate your family. He can't possibly mean that. The word hate here is the same word that was used when God was talking about Jacob and Esau. And he said, "Jacob I have loved and Esau I have hated." And it's not that he hated Esau, it's that he just didn't love Esau as much as he loved Jacob. It's the same idea of Jacob's two wives, two sisters. That's a very complicated and dysfunctional story. Rachel and Leah. Rachel was loved, Leah was hated. Well, she wasn't necessarily hated, but she was loved a lot less than Rachel. In the culture where Luke was living and writing, and of course Jesus living there as well, commitment to family superseded every other commitment. And Jesus, in his teaching, is insisting that his followers place him as their first priority. This goes right along with Matthew 10, verse 37. "Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." So Jesus isn't really telling us to hate our families. No, he's using some very strong language here to say that our love for him must be greater than any other love, even the closest relationships in our lives. It's like a young athlete who dreams of making it to the Olympics. To reach the goal of the Olympics, he must rearrange his whole life around his training. He may love his friends and family, for sure, but his devotion to his goal shapes all of his life priorities for that time. I suppose it's also similar to when a young person joins the military, for example. Before he or she enlists, they have a life full of personal freedoms, spending time with friends, going wherever he or she wants, making their own decisions. But once they sign up, once they're sworn in, everything changes. Their loyalty now belongs to their commanding officer. All other relationships, priorities, and comforts take a back seat to the mission. True disciples worship Jesus, are being changed by Jesus, and obey everything that Jesus commands. So he says, hate your family, hate your life. Again, here, hate is relative, it's comparative. Truly following Jesus means loving him much more than I'm loving myself. It's the question of who am I loyal to? Who has priority over every area of my life? The word here for life is literally soul. It's the real me. Must hate your own soul. Have you ever heard someone say, "I need to find myself"? What does that mean? Well, this often occurs when someone feels lost or uncertain or dissatisfied with their current life direction. They may be looking for a sense of identity, a sense of purpose, a personal fulfillment. Who am I really? What am I meant to do? What will make me truly happy? In our culture, finding yourself often means looking inward, exploring feelings and passions or experiences to craft or create a personal identity. But Jesus flips this idea upside down in Matthew 10:39 when he says, "Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life because of me we'll find it. The paradox is that when we try to find ourselves on our own terms, we actually lose what life is really all about. But when we lose ourselves, meaning we surrender our desires and ambitions and even our very identity to Christ, we actually find the life that we were created for. Who is speaking into your life? Who has the most influence over you? Are you willing to give up lesser things for what is truly worthwhile? Such loyalty, such allegiance actually begins before salvation, it seems to me, because this is how you come to the point of trusting Him with your whole life. You have to become much more than a curious onlooker, a fan of Jesus, coming to Jesus for bread or for healing or just for a fun experience that day. You come to the point where you commit yourself to Him as your only teacher, the only voice you're listening to. As you begin to consider His truth and take it into your life, you feel more and more drawn to Him. And of course, this is all impossible without the work of God's Holy Spirit. Some of His roles are to reveal Christ and to glorify Christ. This is one of the reasons I've said to a number of unsaved friends over the years, we could talk all day long and we could argue all day long about this or that, but you really need to get to know Jesus. You need to get to know Jesus and find out who He is and read everything He taught. Are there areas of your life where devotion to Christ is being challenged? Remember that He is worth it. He is worth all that we could possibly devote to Him. So stand strong against the tide of culture, perhaps even the tide of family culture. Graciously and firmly declare that nothing and no one will have priority over the call of Christ in your life, because true discipleship always leads us to Christ. The second thing that we see here, it's actually in verse 27, is to, what I'm saying, declare your need for Christ. So devote yourself to Christ, declare your need for Christ. Verse 27 says this, whoever does not carry his own cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. This is interesting to me because this is before Jesus carried His own cross. This is a teaching that happened some time before He carried His own cross and died on the cross. So what is He talking about here? Well, our traditional understanding over the years, over the centuries, has been carry your cross means to deny your thoughts, your desires, deny your responses, your dreams, your solutions, your goals, deny yourself. And that's right and good because it goes so closely with the idea of self-denial, but not exactly. Remember, crucifixion was a method of Roman execution. The cross is a symbol of death. It's a symbol of guilt. It's a symbol of condemnation, a curse. To try to understand this before Jesus died, let's look briefly at Matthew and Mark and how they described this in Jesus' teaching. In Matthew and Mark, both, the word deny, or the phrase deny yourself is placed right alongside take up your cross and follow me. So when you have two things alongside each other, it's unlikely that they have the same meaning, right? It's very likely that they have a little bit different meaning. If I'm carrying a cross, then that means I've been tried and found guilty in a Roman court of a crime deserving of death. I have been condemned. Could it be that this is not so much about self-denial, but about admitting my own guilt? And if I am at the place of admitting my own guilt, well, that's the same place where I can also receive Christ's forgiveness. That's why he carried his cross to his own death. The idea of follow me, take up your cross and follow me. The phrase follow me has this idea of trusting in your rabbi, trusting in your teacher. Someone has said that the whole point is to be covered in the dust of your rabbi. You're walking so closely to your teacher that you're covered in his dust. Jeff Vanderstelt in the book 180 says this. He defines discipleship this way. A disciple of Jesus follows Jesus, is transformed by Jesus, and joins Jesus on mission in the world. Who was in the crowd that day, do you suppose? We don't know for sure, but it's likely that the most religious were there, and perhaps the least religious were there. It's probable that there were people there from every level of society: lawyers, fishermen, housewives, boys and girls, farmers, tax collectors, mostly Jews, some Gentiles perhaps. The Jews were a very proud people, were they not? They believed that they were special and holy, and that's why God chose them. They viewed themselves as the innocent victims of the Romans and worthy of God's help and favor. When Jesus said to carry their cross, I think he was saying, admit that you are guilty and that you've been condemned to death because of your sin. That would have been a huge slap in the face, such a hard word for the crowd to hear that day. What sort of teacher is this? He demands that we love him above everyone and everything. He demands that we admit that we're worthy of death. This is not the sort of teacher I'm going to follow. This is impossible. What does it mean for us to carry our cross? Well, Jesus is not interested in a bunch of fans. He's interested in followers, people who are genuine learners of him. So instead of making it easier for people to follow him, he's making it harder. The good news is that Jesus carried his cross and that he was sacrificed on it. A perfect, one-time for all time sacrifice needed to be made because we are all sinners. We've all fallen short of God's glory. Carrying our cross in the sense of Luke 14 here is agreeing with God that I'm a sinner and I'm sentenced to death with no hope of life without trusting in him. True disciples don't just work harder and work longer. True disciples are headed toward Jesus. True discipleship always leads us that way. Devote yourself to Christ, declare your need for Christ, and then depend on Christ. Verse 33 says this, in the same way, therefore, not one of you can be my disciple if he does not renounce all of his own possessions. We've talked about this in months and years gone by, the idea that we are stewards here on earth. We are stewards. We have nothing that actually belongs to us, and hopefully nothing has a hold of us either. We're only able to depend on our teacher for all that we are and have. The key element of discipleship then is dependence on our teacher. Well, Jesus gives a couple of pictures to illustrate what he's trying to say. First, in the realm of building or construction, he says, verse 28, for which of you, wanting to build a tower, doesn't sit down first and compute the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish the tower, all who see it will begin to make fun of him. They will say, this man began to build and he was not able to finish. The call here is to stop and think this through, because the goal in this picture was to finish the project, to finish the building, and the failure to finish the building leads to shame. You make a fool of yourself. The question is, can I afford to finish this well? No, I don't have the money. Okay, let's turn the corner then. And here's the question. Can I afford to follow Jesus? No. I can't afford to follow Jesus. I don't have what it takes to build a relationship with Jesus. He has to provide all of my resources. He has to provide everything, and I'm dependent on him. The other picture that he uses is from the battlefield. He says, what king going out to confront another king in battle will not sit down first and determine whether he's able with 10,000 to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he cannot succeed, he will send a representative while the other is still a long way off and ask for terms of peace. The question here is, can I afford to refuse these demands for peace from this other king? No. I can't afford to refuse these demands for peace because I don't have a big enough army to defeat this king. Our question is this: can I afford to refuse Jesus? No, I can't afford to refuse Jesus. But don't worry, he's already provided the terms for peace with God. That's why it's such good news, because God himself has provided a way. Most of us have probably seen windmills of various kinds here in Texas, on a ranch somewhere or whatever. A windmill, at least the older style windmills, used to spin, they would spin in the wind, and they would pump, maybe some of them would pump water. There was a well down below, and they would pump water up from the well. A windmill doesn't pump up water from the well by its own power. It is completely dependent on the wind. It has to yield to the wind for it to be able to do what it was made to do. It depends entirely on an external force to fulfill its purpose. That's discipleship. Total dependence on Christ. Many of us are feeling our physical limitations more than we used to. Amen? It's a powerful reminder, I think, that discipleship isn't about how strong we are, both in our mind or our body, but about depending on Christ's strength. You may be facing physical limitations or loneliness or a loss of independence in some way. It can be discouraging when you can't do what you used to do, right? But his grace is still sufficient for us, for each day. I want to suggest something to you. Each morning, instead of perhaps focusing on all that you can't do that day, or that you can't do anymore, I would like to suggest that you start out a prayer and just say, Lord, what can I do today through you? What do you have for me today? Maybe it's praying for your family, praying for a neighbor. Maybe it's encouraging a friend with a phone call. Maybe it's sharing wisdom with someone younger. Trust that even in your limitations, Christ is working through you. These days, parents raising children are stretched thin. Oftentimes, it's even grandparents raising children all around us. Because they're balancing work and school and activities and discipline, and it's easy to try to rely on schedules and routines and self-discipline to keep things going, but parenting isn't just about managing chaos. It's about shaping young souls, and that requires dependence on Christ. So before reacting to either a child's disobedience or a stressful situation, take a deep breath and pray, Lord, give me wisdom, give me creativity right now. Instead of just relying on parenting books or personal experience, Ask Jesus daily for guidance. He is the ultimate model of patience and power and love. Many young adults these days feel pressure to figure out their career or figure out relationships of some sort or figure out the future. Our world, our culture tells them to find themselves. Go find yourself. But true fulfillment comes from finding Christ and surrendering to Him. Commit to praying and seeking wisdom from Scripture before making decisions about jobs or relationships or any major life changes. Instead of stressing out over, am I making the right choice? Shift instead to focus on this. Lord, I trust you to lead my steps. Psalm 37:5 says, commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act. True discipleship always leads to Christ. And as we bring the good news to friends and family and our neighbors across the street, let's not be afraid to tell the whole story. Each one of us needs to come to Jesus the same way. He draws us by His Spirit. It's His free gift to us. But following Jesus, being His disciples, is costly. We completely devote ourselves to His influence. We confess our desperate need for Him. We depend on Christ to provide everything. And then, of course, we'll spend the rest of our lives praising Him for His goodness and thanking Him for being such a great gift giver.